Hello, my name's Tim, welcome to Tim Burbage Reads, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Origin by Dan Brown. So I've just read Origin by Dan Brown. This is the fourth book in the Robert Langdon series. It came out in 2017, I think, and the fifth book is coming out later this year, and it's got the great name of The Secret of Secrets. But I started reading Dan Brown maybe just a bit after the Da Vinci Code came out. My mum actually read Angels and Demons before the Da Vinci Code came out. She's like a Dan Brown hipster. And so I've read all of his books. The first book I read was Deception Point, and that's still my favourite. I think I enjoyed the mystery elements, like the context of it more. But, you know, Dan Brown writes very readable thrillers. And now with Robert Langdon, he has a character who is a symbologist who has to solve mysteries, usually in fairly exotic locations around the world with an incredibly attractive lady friend. That's kind of the formula. And this book is very formulaic, right? It does not set the world on fire. But it's just really fun to read. It's just so fun to read. So in this, actually, we don't get a lot of symbology stuff. We get a bit, but it's not a ton. We have the church and religion playing a very large role, as it tends to do in Dan Brown books. And here the big thing being looked at is AI. So when this book was written, AI was very different, and reading it now, there's like big reveals on this is what AI could do, and I'm like, yeah, I know. You know, that's not a big surprise anymore. People know that AI can do that, and it just shows how much the technology has developed over the past 8 years. But yeah, so here we see Robert Langdon and his connection to the case that he has to solve, that he has to work through, is that one of his proteges, someone who he used to teach, has come up with this new thing. And he won't tell you what it is, but there's a big show, and I'm going to tell you what it is at the big show. And then suddenly stuff happens, you know, right at the 25% mark, boom, something happens, cool, everything's kicked off. They make a very big show not to tell you what the secret is. You know, the man's like, he's like, well, what are you going to tell me? He's like, you'll have to wait. And then stuff happens, and he can't tell him anymore. We then go on travels around Spain. So we start off in Bilbao in the Guggenheim Museum, and we end up in Barcelona, where we see Gaudi sculptures and buildings and Sagrada de Familia, you know, hitting those tourist landmarks, so to speak. And it's just really fun. I read it in 2 sittings, you know. I read the first part, I read about 25-30% one night, and then the next couple of days later I was on a plane and I read the whole thing, the rest of it, in one sitting. You know, I think what Dan Brown does, like there's a quote, I think it's a newspaper article or something, does a spoof piece about Dan Brown, and they write it in the prose style that Dan Brown uses, which is kind of going into a lot of detail about some things that are really not that interesting, but, you know, still tells you the story. And it's when you read that excerpt of like taking the mick out of his writing, you can see exactly what he does. But it's so readable. It's so easy to read. It's so not tiring to read at all. Like, I read 300 pages in one sitting, basically. Maybe 250 pages in one sitting. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that with many other books at all. Even if I was stuck on a plane, as I was. You know, when you've got hundreds of films to pick from, I still sat and finished the book. Because I just wanted to know what happens next. There are 105 chapters. Some of them are very short. You know, some of them are just a page because it's like internet website or you know, an article from an internet site, versus the rest of the chapters are kind of take about 4 or 5 minutes to read, you know, really, really quick. There's action and a lot of turns, there's mystery, there's trying to figure out what's going on. And it was just really, really fun. Is it perfect? No, not by any stretch. There isn't a ton of code cracking, which is kind of typical of a Robert Langdon book. And spoiler territory here. There is a spoiler coming up that I just want to mention. Not a big spoiler, but the code that they are looking for is a line of poetry. And they're trying to figure out what this line of poetry is. So they just go to the guy's house and look through his bookshelves. And they spend a lot of, that's the plan. We're going to go to his house and look at his bookshelves. And hopefully he just has his favourite poet out. And it's clearly noted. That's like the main part of their plan. And they spend a large chunk of time going to his apartment and then looking through his bookshelves. They spend like 3 chapters just looking through his bookshelves. And I'm like, this isn't really code cracking. You know, this is like someone who doesn't know how to do puzzles is trapped in an escape room and they just start looking for stuff. So that wasn't kind of the high intelligence of mystery solving that Robert Langdon usually does. But other than that, I still really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. It's kind of 4.5 to 5. It's just, I enjoyed it more than Inferno. I enjoyed it more than The Lost Symbol. And it's similar to Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons. You know, I found the church aspects interesting. You actually had Robert Langdon then talked about his spiritual beliefs at the end, which I think is Dan Brown's spiritual beliefs, ultimately. There are some things about the church which were interesting. I think the villain wasn't very well scoped out. Once again, it's another religious acolyte. He didn't have a ton to do. We didn't spend a lot of time with him, but it doesn't. It's a bit like, I'm trying to just think of how to describe it. You just really enjoy the journey, and he just takes you on a journey, and it's just such an enjoyable ride that afterwards you're like, that wasn't very good, and that wasn't very good, and that wasn't very good. But you didn't care at the time. Nothing ever took me out of reading the book. I just kept turning the page. And that's all I think that's what Dan Brown is going for, and that's all you can ask for, really, from his books. He's not, is just to enjoy the ride. So it did exactly what it aimed to do. And when The Secret of Secrets comes out, I might read it in 8 years' time, who knows? So let me know in the comments below if you've read Origin, what your thoughts were, what your thoughts are on Dan Brown generally. He's one of the biggest selling authors in the world, but a lot of people don't like him very much from his prose perspective. But yeah, let me know in the comments below. Please give this video a like, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, get out of my house!